We are anonymous, a network of analysts, coders, and observers who watch the gears of modern warfare turn, then tell you what those gears are grinding into. We do not traffic in rumor for spectacle. We collect evidence, parse signals, and trace connections until the outline of a larger truth appears. Tonight, we deliver one such truth. What happens when an adversary reaches for the digital heart of American combat power and believes that speed, silence, and signal can mask an assault? What follows is the account of a strike that did not arrive by sea, but by signal, and a counterstrike that rewrote the rules of how modern militaries think about deterrence. At 3:42 a.m., on October 17, 2025, 14 Russian-made suicide drones crept just 6 feet above the water, exploiting radar blind spots like ghosts. They skimmed across the Gulf of Aden and converged on a site the Pentagon had long hidden behind civilian paperwork, a platform officially listed as a power station, but in reality, a pivotal, classified logistics hub the military called Switchpoint Prime. To the world it was Poseidon, 6 outwardly an energy platform, inwardly the central refueling and data fusion node that sustained 3 aircraft carrier strike groups, the unmanned corridors that threaded the Middle East, and the autonomous layers of the United States strike network. The drones hit with terrible efficiency. In less than 6 minutes, 980,000 gallons of JP-8 jet fuel were ablaze. 6 Americans died instantly. More than $134 million worth of fuel, hardware, and high-priority encryption was destroyed. One strike carved a permanent wound into the architecture of modern United States power projection. The first thing to understand is what Poseidon 6 actually did. It was never simply a platform that burned fuel. It was a digital artery. It processed 6,200 encrypted targeting packets a day, coordinated 21 flight paths, and carried real-time combat, telemetry between 3 aircraft carriers, the long-range strike corridors, and swarms of autonomous drones operating over Yemen, Syria, and the Red Sea. It housed the Cold Start refueling cell, the only forward-deployed system capable of refueling a B-21 Raider midair without a carrier touch. It contained Vault 3C, a hardened chamber-storing prototype AI guidance cores, and neural processors for next-generation hypersonic and autonomous systems. When 3 of the attacking drones struck the B-9 fuel tank, a 100-foot fireball ripped upward, and a shockwave akin to a small earthquake buckled structural steel designed for missile impacts. The blast did physical damage, but the digital severing was the strategic blow. A satellite link tower was cut, taking offline 6,200 daily targeting updates that fed United States drones over multiple theaters, an entire class of operations that depended on continuous encrypted, low-latency data feeds, long-range strikes, dynamic retasking. Mid-air refuels suddenly lost that feed. In less than 6 minutes, America's eyes and veins in that region had been partially shut down. We do not state the provenance of the attack lightly. United States Cyber Command rapidly reported that the drones had been controlled via a Type 5 encryption network identical to systems traced to a Russian drone complex. The telemetry signatures and command traces matched a family of protocols developed and fielded at a facility outside the public spotlight. In other words, the attack originated across national borders and across fiber and radio waves. It was a signal strike, launched from the enemy's own territory using networks designed to evade notice. In a technological age, a nation's logistics nodes, the data fusion centers, the refueling arrays, the encrypted update pipelines are as vital as runways and piers. Whoever controls the signal can shape the fight. Whoever severs it can blind an opponent in minutes. The human toll was immediate and brutal. 6 engineers were killed where they stood. 11 others suffered catastrophic burns. Beyond the lives lost was the damage to the calculus of deterrence. For 2 decades, operational planners assumed that certain American logistical nodes were effectively insulated from attack. They were protected by geography, secrecy, redundancy, and the sheer difficulty of hitting hardened, dispersed systems. What Poseidon 6 revealed is that the attack surface of modern war is not limited to steel and concrete. It runs through cables, satellites, and encrypted packets. The attack was not just kinetic. It was a provocation that tested response doctrine. If the architecture of modern war can be attacked quietly, what constitutes an appropriate response? That question moved from theoretical to procedural within minutes. By 3:56 a.m., the shock had given way to a deliberate, calibrated response. The Pentagon invoked Directive 139B, a Tier 1 response authority rarely used outside the gravest contingencies. The mission name was Operation Reprisal. The objectives were surgical: neutralize the launch point, eliminate the enemy UAV infrastructure, recover or destroy any captured American technology, and reassert the inviolability of United States combat networks. Responsibility fell to Rear Admiral Rachel Keane, commander of Carrier Strike Group 9, who would orchestrate a multi-domain counterattack that spanned oceans and time zones. From the decks of the USS Ronald Reagan and the USS Thomas Hoodner to the tarmac at Diego Garcia, American assets moved with a single operational rhythm. 4. F-35C. Lightning II fighters roared into the dawn, carrying AGM-158B cruise missiles to knock out air defenses and fuel stores. 2B-21 Raiders, radios off and transponders silent, taxied on a remote runway at Diego Garcia and lifted into the night. Each B-21 carried 2 GBU-57C massive ordnance penetrator bombs designed to punch through hundreds of feet of reinforced concrete, not symbolic strikes, but instruments to destroy hardened subterranean complexes. MQ-25 Stingray drones launched first, creating a digital curtain that jammed communications and injected decoys into enemy airspace. Then from the decks of American destroyers, 32 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles carved a low, fast wall of fire toward radar sites, assembly hangars, and uplink facilities. What followed was coordinated speed. In under 40 minutes, an integrated joint force had imposed an offensive geometry from the Indian Ocean to deep inside enemy territory. This was not a missile barrage broadcast for headlines. It was a synchronized operation written in aviation fuel code and reinforced steel. It aimed to remove not only the physical capabilities that launched the attack, but also the industrial base and command nodes that could reproduce it. At 6:12 a.m., the B-21S reached a target few outside. Classified, circles could name, a subterranean drone facility buried beneath layers of reinforced concrete and granite. The bombs detonated with the force of tectonic expression. Monitors near the Volga River basin recorded a tremor. Satellite imagery showed plumes of smoke and sections of a compound folding inward. Simultaneously, F-35C aircraft flew treetop profiles with electronic attack suites, blanketing the battlefield with noise, while MQ-25S spoofed radars and lured surface-to-air systems away from valuable assets. Tomahawks found hardened nodes, satellite uplink, stations, AI testing labs, and underground command vaults. In minutes, research infrastructure worth over $1.1 billion. Autonomous cores test data. UAV assemblies was irrevocably destroyed. Intelligence analysts tallied the loss. 47 long-range UAVs, multiple autonomous AI cores, years of prototype work all reduced to smoking ruin. The Marines then executed the final phase. Siege. 53 Super Stallion lifts descended into a hazardous, smoldering landscape. Their mission was binary: recover what could be salvaged or render the remainder incapable of reuse. On the ground, those teams found shattered racks of processors, melted circuit boards, and empty rooms where encryption cores once sat. The message they carried back was clear. What was taken by signal would be answered by steel. By 6:54 a.m., the raid teams lifted off. The operation closed as quietly as it had opened. The global strike had taken place within a 3-hour window, with 0 American combat casualties and no publicly acknowledged enemy survivors at the strike site. Strategically, the lessons are manifold. The first lesson is that modern logistics and data fusion nodes are prime strategic assets. They are not neutral infrastructure. They are force multipliers. Their compromise can scale effects disproportionately. A single severed link can cancel sorties, delay strikes, and force high-value assets to loiter, creating windows of vulnerability across theaters. The second lesson is that offensive cyber and remote command techniques can be weaponized to deliver kinetic outcomes through unconventional vectors. The attacker did not need to cross a blue line to kill engineers, destroy high-value hardware, and degrade operational tempo. The third lesson is that the United States retains the capacity for rapid, multi-domain responses that blend stealth electronic warfare, precision munitions, and special operations recovery forces. That capacity is the heart of deterrence in this era. We must also analyze the psychological layer. An attack that severs a nation's nervous system is an attempt to erode confidence in planners, in commanders, in allied partners who rely on American reach. The speed and precision of the United States response were designed to counter exactly that erosion. It was not simply retribution. It was a demonstration of operational reach and a message to any actor who would test the boundaries. You do not get a free hand against the architecture that allows America and its partners to project power. Any attempt to touch those nerve centers will be met not with bluster, but with calibrated, overwhelming force that restores capacity and signals consequence. It is worth pausing to reflect on what restored capacity means in operational terms. When Vault 3C breached and neural cores were compromised, the Pentagon faced the prospect that proprietary AI guidance technology could leak into adversary hands, not as intact weapons systems, but as templates, algorithms, and training data that could shorten their development timelines. The worst case was that a surviving chip, or even fragments of data, could be reverse-engineered to accelerate the enemy's autonomous capabilities. The recovery and denial mission, therefore, was not only about terminals and racks. It was an information denial operation aimed at preventing leapfrogging. The Marines' recovery teams were ordered to destroy anything that could be repurposed. That denial, carried out on the smoking rubble of a hardened compound, was as important as any missile strike. Public diplomacy and international reaction followed the kinetic events. Allies privately praised the precision and proportionality of the response, while some regional partners publicly offered support. Russia's official response was muted and vague. State media took hours to address what analysts later called an unidentified explosion near a logistics facility. The United Nations Security Council briefly convened and adjourned without a resolution. In short, the great powers traded rhetoric while the operational reality on the ground and underground had shifted. We must be candid about the costs and dangers that remain. The destruction of an adversary's industrial capacity is not equivalent to strategic victory. Destruction breeds adaptation. If a state loses facilities and prototypes, it will disperse, decentralize, and harden future capabilities. It will accelerate covert production, seek third-party partners, or weaponize commercial sectors. That is the adversary's playbook. The second danger is escalation. A kinetic response risks political blowback, proxy escalations, or attacks on third-party infrastructure. The conduct of such operations requires not only tactical superiority, but also a strategic plan for the days and months after the strike, for information sharing, ally reassurance, and measures to mitigate retaliatory or asymmetric responses. Finally, no account of this episode is complete without acknowledging the human element. The engineers who worked at Poseidon 6 were civilians, and military contractors who maintained systems that most of the public never saw. Their work made the remote, silent operations of modern air power possible. 6 of them will never return home. That loss reminds us that the abstractions of infrastructure and systems always have flesh and names behind them. Deterrence is often framed in doctrine. It is lived in the risk, borne by those who keep the systems online. So where does this leave us? The October attack on Poseidon 6 and the ensuing fast, decisive counter-operation are a warning and a lesson in equal measure. They warn that as military capabilities become more distributed and more dependent on data and autonomy, the attack surface expands beyond bases and ships to include code satellites and forward fusion nodes. They teach that deterrence today is not only about the size of one's arsenal, but about the ability to sense, respond, deny, and recover across multiple domains with speed and precision. To those who argue, the response should have been gentler or harsher. The calculus is simple. Failure to answer a direct attack on critical combat architecture invites copycats. A disproportionate, indiscriminate answer invites wider conflict. The operation we describe was designed to be neither revenge nor gratuitous escalation. It was a doctrinally informed, intelligence-driven cascade of actions to remove the immediate threat, recover or deny compromised technology, and reassert a condition in which the logistics of modern war remain secure. Whether you believe that choice was justified may depend on your view of risk, deterrence, and the moral calculus of preemption. But defense planners now must integrate an ugly new truth. In an age of autonomous systems, an enemy can wound you in minutes, and you must be able to answer in minutes. We are anonymous. We do not cheer for conflict. We report on the mechanisms of it so citizens can judge the choices made in their name. We will keep tracing signals, following the code, and naming what others obscure. If you want to see more investigations like this, if you want technical breakdowns of how these attacks are detected and how defenses are hardened, subscribe to our channel and join the conversation. Tell us in the comments, was the response proportional, necessary, or dangerously escalatory? Your perspective matters. The architecture of modern war is visible to those who look. When silence becomes a weapon, transparency is a defense. Support independent